Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida Fair Tax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, April 4th, 2025. Mandatory taxation is fractional slavery, why 1913 was the worst year in American history. This Chairman's Report is written by Professor David Kendall. Professor Kendall earned his Ph.D. in economics from North Carolina State University, and he's currently a professor of economics and finance at the University of Virginia's College at Wise. He was dean of the School of Business at St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, and chief economist for Empire Funding Corporation, also in Austin. While a senior economist with RTI International, Research Triangle Park, North Carolina, Dr. Kendall led numerous applied economic research projects conducted for the FDA, the EPA, and the USDA. Here's David's article that was published on his Substack. In about a month, it will be Tax Freedom Day in America. Now, that's the day of the year the average American has earned enough to pay his taxes for the year. Now, one point of view is that until Tax Freedom Day, Americans work as fractional slaves. Now, I know some readers of that last sentence will disagree, and please forgive my passion. I just finished my annual forced tax return for 2025. Try as I did not to, I cursed like the submarine sailor I was 50 years ago. Fortunately, this year I didn't break anything. I got by cheap. I do my own tax return, and I had to pay only $160 to use the software this year. Well, why not call mandatory taxation what it is? If someone can force us to turn over every penny of our hard-earned income for the first 108 days of the calendar year, as it was in 2023, with Tax Freedom Day falling on April 18th, isn't that something like fractional slavery? A little history will show us how it's gone in America so far. In 1900, Tax Freedom Day fell on January 22nd with an effective tax rate of approximately 5.9%. In 1918, the date shifted to February 8th, reflecting a tax rate of 10.5% as taxes increased to pay for war. 1933, during the Great Depression, Tax Freedom Day was on March 3rd with an average tax rate of 17%. In 1943, in the midst of World War II, it reached April 4th, corresponding to an average tax rate of 25.7%. 1950, the date was March 31st with an average tax rate of 24.6%. 1981, Tax Freedom Day occurred on April 24th, marking the latest date up to that point with an average tax rate of 30.4%. 2000, the latest ever Tax Freedom Day was May 1st, with Americans paying 33% of their income in taxes. In 2010, the date moved a bit earlier to April 9th with a tax rate of 26.9%. 2017, Tax Freedom Day was April 23rd, average tax rate 30.9%. And in 2019, it fell on April 16th with an average tax rate of 29%. And then in 2023, Tax Freedom Day is expected to have been April 18th, but we still don't know for sure because the data are a moving target. Now, we won't know for a year or so what Tax Freedom Day turns out to be in 2025. We can hope it will come before mid-April, but hope isn't all that good a strategy. The year 1913 brought Americans a great evil. It's called the federal income tax. The steady march of Tax Freedom Day deeper and deeper into the calendar year speaks volumes, as they say, about the expansion of American fractional slavery. By now, readers have figured out where I stand on the issue of mandatory taxation. Now here's a thought. Under what conditions is it right and moral for a small group of people to compel us to do what everyone agrees no individual has the right or authority to do by themselves? In my opinion, there are no such conditions, which is why I think mandatory taxation is wrong and immoral. Everyone agrees that no individual has the right to force others to hand over 25 to 30% of their income every year. Stealing's illegal and it's immoral, everyone agrees. Before 1913, so was compulsory taxation. Today, forced mandatory taxation is legal thanks to the 16th Amendment, but it's still immoral. But wait, Isn't mandatory taxation necessary for a successful and prosperous American society? Well, in a word, no. In fact, the opposite is true. From the founding until 1913, America did just fine. In fact, it prospered without it. Roads were built and even paved, lighthouses were constructed, children were educated, and a young America defended itself against foreign aggressors, all without mandatory taxation. Before ratification of the 16th Amendment in 1913, the federal government had, for a brief time, imposed income taxes during the American Civil War, at least what took itself to be the federal government, which you may recall was disputed by 11, and some say 13, of the 34 states at the time. Now, if you think about it, wars aren't really particularly likely without imposition of mandatory taxation or forced military service. Remember the draft? That explains why the first temporary income taxation in America appeared during the Civil War. But in 1895, the Supreme Court struck down federal income taxation in Pollock versus Farmers Loan and Trust Company, ruling it unconstitutional because it was a direct tax on individual income, not apportioned among the states by population as required by the Constitution. The 16th Amendment gave Congress constitutional authority to levy an income tax without apportionment to the state based on population. That opened the door to America's mandatory federal income tax, which is to say, fractional slavery of many at the direction of the few, at least from one moral point of view. Now, just months after ratification of the 16th Amendment, Congress passed the Revenue Act of 1913, signed into law by President Woodrow Wilson. Only the rich would pay, so they said. The Revenue Act of 1913 enshrined in America the first permanent federal income tax made possible by the newly ratified 16th Amendment. Now here's a breakdown of the tax brackets and rates passed by Congress in the Revenue Act of 1913. Income $0 to $20,000, 1%. $20,000 to $50,000, 2%. $50,000 to $75,000, 3%, $75,000 to $100,000, 4%, $100,000 to $250,000, 5%, $250,000 to $500,000, 6%, and over $500,000, 7%. Now, single taxpayers paid no income tax if they made less than $3,000 per year, which translates to about $90,000 in today's money. For married couples filing jointly, the exemption was $4,000. Notice the beginning of the marriage penalty right from the start. Why was the exemption not $6,000 for married couples? Well, income below these levels was not taxed, so only the rich were to be fractionally enslaved. What a relief. We live in fortunate times. We have an alternative to mandatory taxation. We actually have a bill introduced in Congress every 2 years since 1999 called H.R. 25, the Fair Tax Act. There's a link in this CR that's posted at fairtax.org that invites you to complete a brief survey about the fair tax. I hope you will click that link, learn the basics about a moral form of taxation, and share the link with your friends and family. In conclusion, Professor Kendall clearly shows that Americans need to be free of the income tax and how the income tax system is eroding our basic freedoms. As Professor Kendall points out, there is a well-researched replacement plan that's ready to be implemented, the fair tax. The fair tax is a national retail sales tax on new retail goods and retail services that also does the following. It replaces the government revenue now being collected by the income payroll tax system. The fair tax gives us our whole paycheck and lets us decide how much federal tax we pay by how much we spend on new retail goods and retail services. It eliminates all federal taxes on income and all federal tax returns for individuals and businesses. The fair tax provides a family allowance that exempts purchases up to the poverty level from taxation, making it a progressive sales tax. It's administered by the states and eliminates the need for the Internal Revenue Service. Plus, it brings jobs in manufacturing back to the United States and permanently ensures the solvency of Social Security and Medicare. In President Trump, We have a president who sees that the corrupt and incomprehensible income payroll tax system must be eliminated if America is once again going to be free and prosperous. It's imperative, though, that we don't replace the current income tax in the IRS with an alternative system that can still be manipulated by the ruling elite. We must let Congress and the President know that the best way to replace the income tax in the IRS is with the fair tax. Now, make no mistake about it. The fair tax is a grave threat to the ruling elites. It will strip them of their power and their ability to control us through the tax system. Their opposition to the fair tax will be fierce and unrelenting. And don't think for an instant they won't use half-truths, deception, and downright lies in their desperate attempt to hang on to their power. However, with the support of this president, we can fully eliminate the income tax and the IRS. Now, of course, the best course of action is not only to repeal the income tax and abolish the IRS, but to repeal the 16th Amendment as well, so no future administration can ever shackle the American people with an income tax again. We must come together and ensure that real tax reform, the fair tax, is not subverted by the D.C. elites. This will take the diligent efforts from all of us. We need your financial assistance, and we need your grassroots assistance. If you have contacts that will allow us to get more information about the fair tax to President Trump, please let us know. Please email us at info@fairtax.org, and we'll give you some options on how you can best help us. At a minimum, please call your congressional representative and ask if he or she supports the fair tax. If so, thank him or her for their support and suggest they become a co-sponsor of H.R. 25 if they're not one already. If not, ask why not. Now, if your representative claims to be unfamiliar with the fair tax, offer to have someone come to their office and explain it to them. The solution? Pass the fair tax. Now, why would D.C. pass the fair tax and give up an almost unlimited source of donations? Well, they won't, at least not voluntarily. The only way they will is if the rest of us demand it. Isn't it time to end this ludicrous tax collection system in the IRS along with it? Help us bring about real tax reform and stop future IRS abuses. By contributing or investing $10.40 a month, you help provide a financial base to Americans for fair taxation. Now, if you can make larger contributions/investments, these will be used not for salaries, as we're all volunteers, but for the needed updates to our economic studies, which will be vital for all future years. Please go to fairtax.org to invest in AFFT and help us pass the fair tax. It's an investment in your and your family's future.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax, and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org.